Hi, this is Rabbi Tzvi Adel of Congregation Kal Bnei Yisrael, Community of Jewish Friends, the Bar Zelazitz. And this is our third YouTube on Pirkei Avos, the ethics of our ancestors. And we left off last week with how important and how special the Jew is with his fine midas, his fine character, and that all the Halakha Tanoim of the Gemara, all the sages of the Talmud, who had views and prophecies about everything in the Torah, whether it has to do with the laws of Shabbos, whether it has to do with damages or future laws when the temple will be rebuilt, what their view was and how they thought came from their good character, from the character of the neshama. A Jew's good character comes from his neshama, from his soul. It's not something beautiful they thought out in his mind or feelings in his heart, but it comes from a much higher place, our connection to Hashem himself, to God himself. Every Jew is a chelik elokai mimal, as the Zohar says, and the Tanya adds the word mamish. We are actually part of God, so that every Jew is a little God, right? Stupid joke. So that's why, they took a Jew as their God. Every Jew is God, right? So they picked the right guy. Anyway, so that, like Reb Chaim Vital says, that what kind of connection do you have with studying Torah unless you have good character? Good character is between man and man, between man and God. And good character is the way the Torah interprets good character. It's a sad world out there today where people who are consumed with the lowest levels of humanity are the deciders of what's good character and what's not. But the truth is that good character is very much connected with Kedusha V'Torah, with the holiness and purity of a Jew on every level. Give a little story. Tonight is the Rosh Hashanah's Yortzeit, the 11th day of Iyar. And the Halakha Rosh Hashanah was very, very high, like all the students of the Baal Shem Tov and their students. And Reb Naftali Rosh Hashanah, already at a young age, besides knowing the whole Torah, the revealed Torah and the hidden Torah, backwards and forwards, besides being an unbelievable Avodah Hashem, worshiper of Hashem, he was already a Baal Ruach HaKodesh. He already saw open prophecy when he was still a student of Reb Mordechai Neshchiza. And so Rabbi Zevin in his book, one of his books, quotes this story, which unbelievable. So Reb Naftali Rosh Hashanah was in the waiting room with the Chassidim to see the great Reb Mordechai Neshchiza, his Rebbe. He was waiting there and doing tshuva and trying to prepare himself to see the Rebbe's Halakha Tzura, because he knew that the Rebbe's, when he's going to look at him, is going to know everything about him. And all of a sudden, a man walks in. Simple Jew. Didn't look like one of the Chassidim. He didn't look like a great Torah scholar. And the Halakha Rosh Hashanah looks at him, and looks at his forehead, and goes over to him and he says, "Aren't you embarrassed to go to the Rebbe the way you look?" He didn't mean that he wasn't wearing a gartel or that he didn't have a beard. He said, "I know where you were last night and the sins that you committed, and you didn't even go to the mikveh today. How in the world do you have such a chutzpah, such a nerve?" And the guy runs out embarrassed. And immediately after, the Halakha Reb Mordechai Neshchiza, who saw an open prophecy what happened, he runs into Reb Naftali Rosh Hashanah and says, "Naftulcha, what did you do? Not everything that they reveal you from heaven do have to tell people, I don't ever want to see you anymore unless you go and get this guy and bring him back here to me. I'm waiting so long to see him. And the whole room was just amazed, and Rav Shitzer was floored of what happened over here. Obviously, his prophecy was true, and he knows. And why is the Rebbe sticking up for him so much? And the Rebbe told him such a horrible thing that he doesn't want to see him till this guy's back with him. Who is this guy anyway? He's a shmutziak. He's a lowlife. But he wanted to save his soul. So he runs all the way after, who knows where, to some kind of bar, and finds the guy in the bar and begs the guy, please, the Rebbe wants to see you. He says, you embarrassed me? And you said what you said? And you know everything about me, but look what you did to me. I should go back with you? He says, I'm begging you, please. I'm asking you for mechila. I beg your forgiveness, and I'm telling you, my neshama, my life is dependent on if you come with me back to the Rebbe, because the Rebbe wants to see you so much and loves you so much. Anyway, so grudgingly, the guy comes back with him, and as soon as they come into the waiting room, the Rebbe runs out again from his private room and says, Sheftel, Getzel, I'm so happy to see you. And he hugs him and kisses him. You know how long I've been waiting for you. And he takes him immediately in his room while everybody was still waiting. He speaks to him for a longer time. And the guy comes out, and the Rav Shitzer is still waiting there with the Chassidim for that chance to go into the Rebbe. And the Rebbe turns to Naftali Rav Shitzer and says, this Yid used to be a chassid of mine. He used to come to me always, and he asked me how to worship Hashem, and he would ask me about business. He asked me how to bring up his children, everything. And somehow, Sarana Jukin cup, like they say in Yiddish, this Mishigas came into his head, this craziness, and he started drinking, and then he didn't have enough money, so we'd go rob, and then he'd rob and steal from people, and then finally he did other sins, and he became mamash a lowlife, and he was embarrassed to come back to me. And not so long ago, I had the special schus, the special merit and honor. I begged Hashem in heaven to be allowed to put an awakening of tshuva in his soul, that he should long to do the right thing and to become better and to become again close to Hashem. And it happened. He had this great awakening. But something pulled him back. And last night he said to himself, I'm going to try to go to the Rebbe. If the Rebbe accepts me, I'm going to do tshuva. I'm coming back to Judaism. If not, I go to the priest and I convert. And he came here. And you with your big Ruach HaKodesh, your great prophecy, you don't have to say everything that you know. Why'd you do that to him? You're going to be a rebel one day. You'll have thousands of people coming to you. If that's how you're going to treat them, what's God going to have from that? It's great. You're a great prophet. You're a Talmid Chacham. You're a scholar. You're a chassid. So he learned a great lesson that night. And it's a lesson that we all have to learn always, in every situation. And this is what Pirkei Avos is all about. We will start with the third chapter, since that's going to be what all of Israel is going to be reading this coming Shabbos. We want to be part of Klal Yisrael. And the chapter begins with Akavya ben Mahalalel. Who was Akavya, the son of Mahalalel? Akavya, the son of Mahalalel, the Taisis Yantiv quotes the Mishnah in Nidyas that says that in the temple, in the Azara, the great doors were closed to everyone who came, and it would miraculously open because of the level of wisdom and fear of sin that Akavim ben Mahalalel had. This is the Akavim ben Mahalalel that we're going to learn about. What does he have to say? So Akavim ben Mahalalel says that Istakel b'shlosh dvarim, one should look into three things, and you won't come to sin. Know from where you come, and where you are heading towards, where you're going to, and in front of who you will have to give a judgment and a reckoning. Where do you come from? A drop of semen that smells from a human being's lust and desire, very low place. Where are you heading towards? To a place of worms, and in front of who are you going to have to give a reckoning? In front of the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He. Doesn't sound too encouraging. And so the Chassidish Sfarim say it means as follows. The Mishnah first says, look at three things. The Yosef says it doesn't mean to look physically, but it means to, one should believe so much in these three things that it should become a yediyah. It should be a knowledge that brings them to action, right? There are some things that you have a shallow knowledge, right? You might know your address, and your neighbor, you might not know your neighbor, depending on where you live. You might not even know the color of your house. But you do know that when it's a red light, you better not cross, because your life is dependent on it. So these three things by a Jew should be so clear that we know that our life depends on it. It's the yediyah. Das brings action. So these three things a person should always think to himself. And first, the positive. The ayin basa, where do you come from? That's what it says in the Mishnah. Every Jew comes from the highest place, as we just now said. We all come from Chelik Elikam Imal. We come from the Merkava L'Shchina. Every Yid is Hashem's only child, as the Baal Shem Tov says. No one extra. There's no one extra by the Jewish people. We are all Hashem's only child. Well, and where are you going? A Jew is always going. Hailech means to go, to continue, to grow. A Jew is always growing. Very important for us to always remember that. And in front of who are you going to give a reckoning? To the one that loves you most, the one that's created you and is looking for your good and wants you to grow and to be closer to your neshama. And then it says the negative side, where you come from, a drop of semen, where you're heading to, a place of worms, and in front of who you're going to give a reckoning to, one that the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He. King of Kings is being in this world, because Malchus is in this world. God is with us in this world, knows everything about us. He knows our weaknesses. He knows our strengths. And so He doesn't expect us to be what we're not, what we're really not. And added to that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, one that is so beyond. Kadosh means being beyond, right? We had last week's Parashat Kedoshim to you. The Jewish people should be something beyond, separated from things that in the other world, that in the rest of the world is considered a norm. It's only normal for the two genders to mix together and be attracted to each other. Hashem wants us to. Our norm should be that the genders are separated and are not attracted to each other. The norm in the world is you eat whatever you want. Our norm is eating matzah only, not chametz. And the Chassidish Sfarim say that the fact that we eat only kosher all year round is to keep us on the level of matzah and not chametz. Matzah is such a high thing. Matzah, the Zohar says, brings emunah, brings faith. Matzah brings refuah, brings healing of the body. I personally had a story I mentioned it, and a friend of mine had even a friend of mine is a principal in an elementary school in Brooklyn, and he had such a bad case of he had to keep away from wheat to the extent that he couldn't wash for bread all year round, even on Shabbos and holidays. And a kid once gave him a barbecue potato chips. So he wanted to try it. Within a couple of minutes, they had to take him to the hospital. The Hatzalah had to take him. This same man, the night of Pesach, he told me this himself, eats matzah like anybody else. Because matzah brings emunah, faith in Hashem. Matzah brings refuah, when done the right way. When done with this in mind, I'm doing Hashem's mitzvah, of course, and I believe that it has in itself the strength of giving me emunah and refuah. So again, all these things that we learn about are things that lead our lives and that we believe, and it's das, and it's Melech Melchei Amlochem HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem is in this world with us, but He's also way, way beyond. And so that He understands and He knows how much He could expect from us and how much He can expect from us, and how does one know as a simple person like you and I know. So for that we need an emes tzaddik that knows these things, because the true tzaddik that every one of us is connected to, that tzaddik knows what's to be expected of us and what's too much for us. On the one hand, the Radzina writes in his introduction to his Beis Yaakov, and I don't have it here, but I saw it quoted by Rabbi Yaakov Perlau in his Emunat Tzadikim, Darkei Tzadikim, and he writes an unbelievable thing. The Radzina, he writes, what was the Chiddush of the Baal Shem Tov? What did the Baal Shem Tov do? What did we not have before the Baal Shem Tov came, and what do we have now that the Baal Shem Tov came to the world and saved Yiddishkeit, as so many great leaders told us? So he says the Baal Shem Tov taught the world, taught the Yidden, that every single neshama, from the highest neshama to the lowest neshama, is connected to every single passage, every part of the Torah, from the highest and deepest parts of the Torah to the simplest and simplest parts of the Torah. And somehow, in some way, the greatest tzaddik, who knows everything, has to do and know the simplest things, has to put on tefillin, has to keep Shabbos, and not eat non-kosher, besides all the high things that he knows. And the simplest Jew has a connection also with the highest and everything on his level. And this is the Kol Yisrael Yesh Lam Chayil Kol Haba. Every Jew has a part of the world that is coming, as we said, coming to him. That's why it's called the world that's coming. Because in some minute way, in some way, every one of us is connected to every part of the Torah. Therefore the Zohar says, Yisrael v'Rayis v'Kudsha b'Richu Chadu. The Jews and the Torah and Hashem are connected as one. And the Mishnah says, when we think in the positive way, which is, the Mishnah first enumerates these three things in the positive way. Dama, Yayin, Basa. Where do you come from? You come from Ayin, from such a high place. And where are you going? You're always growing. You're always striving. You're always growing. You're always going and growing. And in front of who are you going to have to give a reckoning? Be appeased that you will have to give a reckoning in front of someone who really knows you, who's Melech Malchem Lachem HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who's the most in this world possible to be. God is all over. There's no action, thought, or words that could be spoken that don't have part of Hashem, the chiyas of Hashem in it. But he's also HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the only one that could lead you and tell you is the one that really knows, the tzaddik that's so closely connected to Hashem that he really knows who you really are. We'll do one more now. Reb Chanina Skan HaKohanim, Chanina, the assistant to the Kohanim, would say, a person should pray for the peace of the government, even a non-Jewish government, because if people don't have fear of the government, a man will swallow his friend alive. The Bartanura says that Talmud says in Tractate Avodah Zarah, page 72, Ayin Beis, that the fish of the ocean, the greater one swallows the smaller one. So too, without fear of the government, the greater person will swallow the smaller one, whatever level greater and smaller that is, taller or stronger or has more money and therefore could connive him or whatever it might be. So the minimal thing that keeps a person from sin is fear of the government, acknowledging that there is a government, whether you believe in Hashem, whether you studied the Mishnah before or not, but there's a good reason to have a working government. We'll stop here meanwhile. Have a great Shabbos.